A high-stakes international meeting erupts into tension when the CEO insults his Arabic translator. As the room freezes, a quiet figure, the janitor's teenage daughter, watches everything. One symbolic act flips the room's balance, and a cliffhanger hints at a hidden strength that nobody expects. "We don't need your kind messing up our deals." The words slice through the marble-walled conference room like a blade. Under the cold flicker of recessed lights, a hush spreads over the long polished table where executives in crisp suits sit frozen, eyes darting between the CEO and the stunned translator. Outside, London's skyline glimmers through floor-to-ceiling windows, but inside, the air feels tight enough to choke. Mr. David Halberg, the CEO of Orion Exports, leans back in his leather chair, fingers drumming against the sleek tablet in front of him. His silver cufflinks gleam as he flicks a dismissive glance at Yusuf, the young Arabic translator whose pale knuckles grip a folder full of confidential agreements. The room watches. Some pretend to read notes, others stare openly, waiting to see how far the boss will push it. Yusuf's lips part, but no words come. He adjusts his tie, eyes darting to the ground. Behind him, standing half-shadowed near the double doors, is Amina, just 16, the janitor's daughter. She's not supposed to be here, but her father asked her to drop off his cleaning cart before school. Now she stands invisible, pressed to the wall, her eyes wide at the spectacle unfolding in front of her. David's smirk widens when Yusuf doesn't speak. "What, cat got your tongue?" he sneers. A chuckle ripples from two junior partners at the far end, but it dies quickly under the tension squeezing the room. Amina's heart pounds. She clutches the handle of the cleaning cart so hard that a brittle crack echoes the plastic bottle of floor polish splitting open under her grip. The sickly sweet scent of lemon cleanser seeps into the air, mixing with the stale aroma of burnt coffee. Nobody notices her yet. They're too busy watching the public humiliation. "Pack your things," David snaps, voice dripping with contempt. "I'll find someone who actually knows how to keep their mouth shut and their loyalty clear." Yusuf lifts his chin. There's a quiet, desperate pride in his eyes. He reaches for the contract folder. His hands shake so badly that a few papers slip free, drifting across the glass table like fallen leaves. No one moves to help him. Pages slide to the polished floor, ignored. David watches him fumble, savoring the discomfort. He taps his pen on the glass table, the sound sharp and rhythmic, a judge's gavel in a one-man courtroom. Amina feels a rush of heat in her cheeks. Her father's words echo in her mind. "Keep your head down, don't make noise, we need this job." But watching Yusuf's humiliation twists something tight in her chest. The CEO's arrogance, the silent complicity it burns. She shifts her weight, the cracked bottle of polish dangling from her hand, leaking slowly onto the marble floor. Yusuf crouches to pick up the papers. David clicks his tongue, then with a casual flick, uses the heel of his Italian shoe to pin the last page to the floor. Yusuf's eyes lift, humiliation mingling with a spark of something else. David leans down, lips curling. "Learn your place." The words hang in the air like poison. Something snaps. Amina steps forward. The movement is so small, so soft, that no one notices until the splash hits the CEO's shoe, lemon-scented cleanser, dripping down the polished leather, seeping into the fine stitches. David freezes. Slowly, he lifts his foot, stares at the spreading yellow stain. His head jerks up, eyes narrowing to find the source. The room shifts, gasps flutter. Every pair of eyes locks onto the janitor's daughter, standing beside the cleaning cart, empty, bottle dangling from her fingertips. Yusuf watches her too. Surprise, confusion, something like hope flickering behind his glasses. David's voice is a hiss. "What do you think you're doing here?" Amina meets his gaze. Her pulse hammers so loud she thinks the entire room can hear it, but her voice is steady, clear. "Cleaning up your mess," she says, her words slicing the hush like a blade. The boardroom erupts in whispers, a flurry of papers and shocked glances. David takes a step forward, rage flushing his neck red. But Amina doesn't flinch. Her father's overalls hang loose on her small frame, but her shoulders are squared, her chin lifted. Yusuf pushes himself up, papers clutched tight to his chest, watching this girl who appeared from nowhere to stand in front of the company's king. In that small defiance, he finds his own spine again. Amina's eyes flick to the door. Security is already on its way. She can hear the pounding footsteps. In the corridor, she looks back at David, her voice calm but carrying an edge sharper than glass. "Maybe hire someone who understands more than one language," she says softly, just as the door swings open behind her. David's eyes widen at her words, not the defiance, but what they imply. Amina lifts her chin higher, a tiny smile tugging at her lips. The whisper of possibility crackles through the tension. Electric and unstoppable. The translator is gone, but maybe, just maybe, the janitor's daughter knows exactly how to be heard. Amina barely flinches as the glass doors swing open behind her. 2 suited security guards rush in, shoes squeaking on the marble. The room's hum of whispers dies at once. All eyes are on the girl with the leaking polish bottle and the CEO's ruined shoe. David turns on them like a lion cornered by its own prey. "Get her out of my sight, now." One guard, a bulky man with a buzz cut, steps forward. His hand closes around Amina's arm with just enough force to make her wince, but she doesn't fight. Instead, her eyes lock onto David's unwavering. In the hush, Yusuf clears his throat. He holds up a trembling hand, as if to speak, but David snaps, "You out. Useless." His voice echoes through the conference room, bouncing off glass and metal until it feels like it's everywhere at once. The guards move to drag Amina away. She feels the pull on her shoulder, but she plants her feet. The cart clatters against the wall. In the silence that follows, she opens her mouth and speaks, but not in English. Her voice comes low and fluid, shaping the rich, rolling syllables of Arabic, the same dialect Yusuf had been translating just minutes ago. She doesn't shout, she doesn't plead, she recites, word for word, the last line from the abandoned contract that Yusuf had dropped, the clause that would have cost Orion Exports millions if mishandled. The words pour from her lips, smooth and confident, a melody hidden beneath. Janitor's rags. The 2 guards freeze. David's brow furrows, the heat draining from his face as the meaning sinks in. He doesn't understand Arabic, but he knows enough to recognize the weight of what she's just repeated. Amina stops. The room stays silent. The older board members exchange looks, startled, calculating. For a heartbeat, nobody moves. David recovers first. He barks a sharp laugh, though it rings hollow. "Who taught you to parrot that? You think you're clever? Your father feed you lines while mopping my floors." Amina lifts her chin, ignoring the guard's hand still clutching her arm. "My father never taught me," she says, switching back to English, her voice steady and loud enough for every executive to hear. "Your contracts did." A ripple of confusion cuts through the boardroom. Amina's gaze sweeps the table. "I've been cleaning these rooms since I was 9. I emptied your trash, scrubbed your tables, and read every page you threw away." David sneers, "So you can read a few scraps. You're a child playing with grown-up words." She doesn't look at him. She looks at the clients on the far side of the table, the men in tailored suits who had flown in from Riyadh just to finalize this delicate deal. Their eyes are wide, fixed on her. One of them, a senior delegate named Mr. Al-Hadi, lifts a hand as if to reach across the gap between the boardrooms to worlds. He says something in Arabic. A test. Amina doesn't hesitate. She answers fluently, each word shaped by years of whispered practice in dusty hallways, borrowed books from second-hand shops, her father's muffled prayers behind closed doors. David's face pales. His fingers flex at his side like claws desperate to grip something solid. But there's nothing solid left, only a teenage girl standing barefoot in her father's faded overalls. Outshining the translator, he just kicked to the curb. "YUSUF, forgotten until now," exhales. The folder in his arms shifts as he clutches it tighter. His eyes flick from Amina to David, then back again like he's watching an ancient stone wall crack under the force of a single seed. David tries to laugh again. "Even if you speak it, you're nothing. A child. The janitor's brat." Amina lifts her chin. The fear is still there, buzzing in her bones like an electric wire, but it has nowhere to go but forward. She nods at Yusuf. He's gone. He still needs someone to close the deal. She looks back at David, letting the silence stretch. "I can do it." A collective intake of breath rolls down the table like a tide hitting stone. David opens his mouth, but no words come out. He looks at the delegates, who do not look at him. They're looking at her. Yusuf clears his throat, his voice dry but steady. "She's right. Without a translator you trust, you lose everything now." David's face twists the mask of authority, cracking under the weight of a truth too big to stomp out. His eyes flick to the door as if an answer might be waiting outside. Amina doesn't wait for permission. She steps forward, shaking off the guard's grip, her father's overalls brushing her sneakers. The boardroom's air shifts around her from stale tension to a thin, sharp current of possibility. She glances at her father's old cleaning cart, still leaking polish on the marble floor. Then she turns back to the men in suits and speaks, her Arabic flawless and steady. "Shall we continue?" The stunned silence that follows feels like the first crack of dawn after a storm. Amina slides into the vacant chair at the end of the long glass table. The same seat Yusuf used just an hour ago. The conference room is no longer silent. Instead, the air hums with an awkward tension as pages shuffle, pens click, and whispers flow in and out of English and Arabic. David stands rigid behind his chair, arms crossed so tightly across his chest that his expensive watch digs into his wrist. He glances at the security guards, then at the foreign delegates, now leaning closer to Amina. He's a shark forced to swim in shallows, and he hates every second of it. Amina's hands tremble under the table where no one can see. Above the polished surface, they're steady as she smooths the edges of the scattered contract pages. She glances at Yusuf, who hovers behind her like a ghost nobody knows what to do with. His eyes flick between her and the board members, silently cheering her on. She clears her throat. "Mr. Al-Hadi," she says in English first, then switches to Arabic so smoothly that the flow startles even the skeptical executives. "We can pick up where we left off. The clause in question," she flips the page with a soft snap, "has a condition that can be adjusted to protect both parties. May I?" Al-Hadi nods, once, visibly impressed. His associate leans in to whisper something, but Amina is faster. She responds before the words even reach the table. The two men exchange glances, a flicker of a smile playing at the corner of Al-Hadi's mouth. Across the table, David's voice slices through her calm. "You think they'll trust a child reading scraps she found in the garbage?" His laugh is cold, calculated for the audience. "You're embarrassing yourself, girl." Amina looks up at him slowly, like she's studying an insect she can't quite decide to swat away or let crawl. Her voice stays polite, sharp enough to draw blood without showing the knife. "You hired a translator who didn't understand this clause," she says evenly, flicking her eyes to Yusuf for only half a heartbeat. They both know Yusuf did understand, but David's impatience made him rush. "Would you rather your partners think you can't tell the difference?" A hiss of whispers cuts through the room like a breeze through dry grass. One junior executive stifles a grin before David shoots him a look that turns it to stone. Yusuf lowers his head, a flush creeping up his neck. But when he looks at Amina, there's a flicker of something grateful, forgiveness for telling a lie, that saves his pride. Amina turns her focus back to the delegates. She switches fully to Arabic now, her voice low but confident as she explains the clause, line by line, tracing the hidden trap that could have cost them a small fortune if the contract had gone through, as David insisted. She sketches a small amendment in the margin, then slides it to Al-Hadi, her finger tapping the line like punctuation. The older man studies her note. He mutters something to his colleague, then looks at David. "We want her to finish," he says in lightly accented English, just clear enough that no translation is needed for this insult. David's jaw flexes. He tries to smile, but it comes out wrong, tight at the edges, sharp in the eyes. "Of course, we want what's best for our partners," he says. His voice drips with sugar, but Amina hears the threat under every syllable. In the hallway, behind the frosted glass, another shadow appears. Amina's father, Karim, stands half hidden by the cleaning cart. His mop leans forgotten against the wall. He watches his daughter in the center of the room he's only ever seen from the edges. The room he's polished and swept and vacuumed in silence for 12 years. Inside, Amina feels his presence before she sees him. She doesn't dare turn her head, but she knows. She can almost hear his breath catch when she corrects David mid-sentence, repeating his awkward paraphrase in perfect Arabic and clarifying a point he tried to twist to save face. The delegates nod, their pens scratching as they adjust their copies of the contract. Yusuf watches too, shoulders straightening a little more every time Amina opens her mouth. The board members, so used to speaking over invisible workers like her father, now sit in stunned, restless silence. One by one, Amina answers each question, never rushing, never stammering. When she hesitates, it's deliberate. She lets the Silence press against David's authority until it cracks just a little more. Kareem presses a palm to the glass. He sees the stain of coffee on his daughter's sleeve, the one she must have brushed against when pushing the cart. He sees how she doesn't try to hide it, how she wears it like armor in this room of polished suits and sterile ambition. For a second, pride swells in his chest so fiercely it almost chokes him. But fear follows close behind. Fear of what will happen when this meeting ends, when the CEO corners her alone. Inside the room, Amina holds her ground. She lifts her head and smiles. Small, controlled, as the final agreement settles into place. Word by careful word, the girl with the mop bucket just spoke the words that could save a multi-million-dollar deal, and the CEO can't do a thing. But watch. The final handshake echoes like a quiet thunderclap in the cavernous boardroom. Amina's fingers brush against Al-Hadi's as he clasps her hand with a respect that would have been unthinkable an hour ago. His smile is small but genuine, the kind reserved for equals, not servants. YUSUF stands just behind her, his folder hugged to his chest like a shield. He keeps glancing at David, who sits slumped at the head of the table, his pen tapping an angry rhythm that betrays the polite mask he's struggling to hold in place. "Thank you," Miss Amina Al-Hadi says, switching back to English for David's benefit and to twist the knife a little deeper. "Your explanation was clear, much clearer than our last discussion." He doesn't look at David when he says it. He doesn't need to. Amina dips her head slightly. "I'm glad I could help, sir." Her voice is steady, but inside her heart is a drumbeat she can barely control. She wants to run, to hide, to tell her father it's over and they're safe. But there's no going back to invisibility now. One by one, the delegates stand and gather their papers. Chairs scrape softly on marble as they shake hands with board members who try to salvage their dignity with stiff smiles and tight grips. But the center of gravity in the room has shifted. It rests on a 16-year-old girl wearing oversized overalls and a coffee stain. David doesn't stand. He stays in his chair, eyes narrowed to slits as he watches Amina thank each guest in Arabic. Every polite phrase is a tiny rebellion against his authority. When the last delegate leaves, the door swings shut behind them with a soft click that echoes like a gavel. The silence is immediate, heavy, dangerous. "Why us, UF?" clears his throat, adjusting his glasses. I should go gather the rest of the documents. Leave them." David snaps. His voice is quiet, but the edge slices deep. Yusuf flinches, nods once, then slips out the door without another word. The faint sound of his hurried steps fades down the hall. Amina stays standing. She forces her shoulders back even as her knees threaten to buckle. She can feel her father behind the frosted glass. The cleaning cart still stands like a sentry. At the edge of this battlefield, David pushes back from the table. The chair's legs scrape with a teeth-gritting screech. He rises slowly, smoothing his suit jacket as if the right crease could iron out his humiliation. "Well," he says, voice dripping false sweetness, "a translator and a janitor's daughter. How convenient for you." Amina says nothing. She studies the glint of anger beneath his cold smile, the simmering need to punish what he can't control. He steps closer. "You think you're clever. You think you're irreplaceable now." Amina doesn't flinch. "I think you needed the deal closed, and I did that." David's lips twitch. He leans in just enough for her to smell his expensive cologne. Sharp, chemical, suffocating. A smart girl would know when to keep her mouth shut after being useful. Amina holds his gaze, her silence stronger than any answer. He lets out a quiet laugh. "Enjoy your moment, Miss Janitor. I hope you like the taste of it." Then he brushes past her, the tailored shoulder of his suit knocking into hers hard enough to make her stumble a step sideways. She catches herself on the back of a chair. David doesn't look back. He snaps his fingers at his assistant hovering near the door, a thin man in a dark suit with sharp eyes and a laptop tucked under one arm. "Find out who she is," David murmurs, his voice too low for Amina but not for the walls. "School, family, anything that sticks." The assistant nods quickly, not daring to meet Amina's eyes. He slips out behind David, footsteps soft but hurried. Only then does Amina exhale. Her fingers grip the chair so tightly her knuckles ache. She can still feel David's shoulder slamming into hers like a threat made of bone and fabric. The door opens again, this time gently. Kareem stands there, cap in hand, shoulders hunched like a man carrying a weight too big to hide. His eyes dart around the empty boardroom before they find her. Amina, he breathes. His voice is soft, but the crack in it is wide enough to swallow the whole room. She wants to smile, to tell him it's all right. But her throat tightens when she sees the way he's wringing his cap, sweat darkening the brim. Baba. She steps forward, words tumbling. I had to. He holds up a hand, not angry, just afraid. He looks over his shoulder, as if David might appear again, like a ghost in a suit. You don't know what you've done. She shakes her head stubbornly. I do. I helped. Kareem's eyes glisten. He pulls her close, one rough hand cupping the back of her head, like he's trying to shield her from a world that just noticed she exists. For a moment, the smell of floor polish and cheap soap replaces the cologne and glass and marble. You were brilliant, Habibati, he whispers. His pride leaks through the cracks in his fear, but sometimes brilliant makes enemies. Behind them, the glass doors reflect a girl in overalls and a janitor with tired eyes, standing at the center of a world that just changed forever. The morning after the meeting, the Orion Exports Tower hums with whispers. In the break rooms, in the elevators, in the copy rooms behind half-closed doors, people say her name, the janitor's daughter who saved the deal. Some say it like a legend already, some like a warning. Amina tries not to hear any of it. She pushes her father's squeaky cleaning cart down the hallway as if nothing's changed. But every reflection in the glass walls shows her a different truth. A girl too big for the shadows now. She keeps her head down as executives pass. Their chatter lowering to murmurs when they see her. Some nod stiffly. Some don't look at her at all, as if pretending she's invisible will make the embarrassment vanish too. She's wiping down a glass, railing when a voice cuts through her thoughts. Amina, she turns so fast, the rag slips from her hand and lands on the marble floor with a wet slap. It's David's assistant, the sharp-eyed man with the laptop always tucked under his arm. He stands too straight, too polite, hiding a warning under his smooth smile. Mr. Halberg would like a word with your father. He doesn't bother looking at her as he adds, now. Amina's pulse thuds in her throat. She catches sight of Kareem at the far end of the hall, head down, pushing his mop bucket. He looks so small against the glass and steel. She jogs over, picking up her rag on the way, fingers slick with cleaning fluid. Baba, she says softly when she reaches him. The CEO wants to talk to you. Kareem's eyes flick up, searching her face. He knows her too well to ask why. His shoulders slump. Stay here, he murmurs. Don't follow. But Amina's protest dies in her throat when he squeezes her hand. Just once, she watches him go, his steps slow, mop water sloshing behind him in a bucket he abandoned halfway. The assistant leads him down the hallway like a sheep, to a waiting wolf. Amina stands by the railing, knuckles white around the damp rag. She tries to look busy, polishing the same spot over and over, until her reflection blurs behind streaks of water inside David's office. The door clicks shut. Behind Kareem, he stands just inside the doorway, cap clutched between both hands. The office is all polished wood and brushed steel, the air smelling faintly of expensive cologne, and something burnt the last dregs of David's bitter coffee. David doesn't offer him a seat. He doesn't even look up from the paper he's pretending to read. When he does, it's with a smile that makes Kareem's stomach twist into knots. Double quotes. Mr. Kareem. Is it? David says, dragging out each syllable like he's savoring the taste of something sour. You've been with us. How long now? 12 years, sir, Kareem says softly. 12 years, David repeats, nodding as if this is fascinating news. He leans back in his leather chair, fingertips tapping the armrest. You've been reliable, quiet, useful. Kareem shifts his weight from one foot to the other, the cap twisting in his rough hands. Thank you, sir. David's smile sharpens. But lately, he says, voice dipping lower, I hear whispers about your daughter, about you, about impropriety. Kareem's brow furrows. Sir, with respect, she only. David raises a hand, cutting him off like a blade. She humiliated me, Kareem. The false smile vanishes like breath on glass. In front of our partners, in front of this entire floor. You'd think I can have my employees' children playing hero in my boardroom. Kareem's mouth opens, then shuts. He tries to swallow, but his throat feels dry and tight. David stands. He crosses the room in 2 slow steps, stopping just close enough that Kareem can smell the bitterness in his breath. He lowers his voice to a hush that somehow feels louder than a shout. You and your daughter live on the goodwill of this company. On my goodwill. He taps a finger to Kareem's chest, soft, but with a hidden threat in the touch. You know, what happens to people who forget that? Kareem's lips tremble. Sir, please. She only embarrassed me, David snaps, dropping the mask entirely. His eyes flash cold, shark-like. You think she's clever? Clever girls make mistakes. Clever girls trip. Clever girls disappear when no one is watching. The words settle like frost on Kareem's skin. He forces himself to meet David's stare, though every bone in him wants to drop his eyes. David steps back, adjusting his cufflinks. Keep her in line, he says. The soft threat tastes like poison in the air. Or you'll be back on the street, and your clever girl will be scrubbing floors you can't even afford to walk on. A quiet knock at the door makes both men flinch. The assistant peeks in his eyes, flicking from Kareem's stricken face to David's calm cruelty. That'll be all, David says smoothly, like they've just finished discussing cleaning supplies. Kareem backs away, the brim of his cap crushed in his palm. He doesn't speak, just nods once and slips out, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Outside, Amina stands frozen by the railing, her rag forgotten in her hand. Kareem's eyes find hers, and in that single glance, she knows David won't stop until he breaks them both. The hallway feels too bright when Kareem steps out of David's office. Fluorescent lights hum overhead, harsh and clinical, washing out the fear carved into his face. He sees Amina waiting where he left her, one small figure with a rag in her hand and resolve in her eyes. He hates that resolve right now. Amina, his voice is barely above a whisper, but she hears the quiver in it before he even reaches her. She drops the rag, grabs his arm. What did he say? Kareem forces a smile. It doesn't fit. It slides off his face before it can settle. Nothing. Just told me to keep you out of the way. Amina's mouth twists. He threatened you. It's fine. He lies. We just need to keep our heads down. Clean. Work. Like always. Like always. She pulls back, voice sharper than she means it to be. You want me to pretend it didn't happen? Pretend I didn't help? Pretend I can't? Amina. He cuts her off, squeezing her shoulder. His hands are rough, calloused from years of scrubbing floors others wouldn't even touch. I want you safe. I want you home, not standing in front of men like him. She looks at him, really looks at him, the way she did as a child, when he taught her how to wrap the frayed handle of a broom with old cloth so it wouldn't cut into his palm, how to fix broken things instead of throwing them away. You told me to be quiet, she says softly, to stay invisible. He looks away, ashamed. I wanted you hidden from men like him. I never wanted you hurt, but I am hurt, she says. Her voice cracks, just enough to make him flinch. I see how they look at you, Baba, like you're nothing, like I'm nothing, and I let it go because you asked me to, but I won't disappear again. She says it gently, but there's iron underneath, iron he knows she inherited from her mother, a woman who taught Amina how to stand tall, even when the world wanted her on her knees. Kareem rubs a hand over his face. He glances around, but the hallway is empty now. The gossipers have drifted back to their desks. Pretending work is more important than the storm brewing on these clean marble floors. Promise me, he says. The words come out raw. Promise me you won't push him again. Amina doesn't answer. She takes his hand instead, folds it into both of hers, warm against his cracked knuckles. I promise, she whispers. But inside, she knows she can't keep it, not really. That night, their small flat above a corner laundromat feels too cramped for sleep. The city hums outside the window, taxis, sirens, the dull roar of traffic, never really ending. Amina sits on the floor by their second-hand sofa, knees tucked to her chest. Kareem drifts in and out of restless dreams on the couch behind her, mumbling words she can't always make out. On the battered coffee table sits her secret, the old duct-taped notebook she's filled cover to cover since she was 10. Phrases in Arabic, in English, scribbled side by side. Contract clauses she copied from scraps in the boardroom bins. Vocabulary lists, idioms, even Yusuf's annotations, once left behind in the break room, now carefully traced over in her neat handwriting. She flips through the pages now, fingertips brushing the ink like she's searching for courage in every stroke. She remembers how Yusuf looked at her, like she was more than just the girl with the mop, like she was someone who could stand at that table and be heard. And she remembers David's eyes too, cold, hungry to remind her of her place. Her place, she almost laughs. Who decides where she belongs? She glances over her shoulder at her, Father, the man who scrubbed floors so she could read in secret, the man who taught her dignity can't be mopped away. No matter how many times someone like David spills it, Amina picks up a pencil stub from the table and pulls a scrap of paper from her notebook's back pocket. She writes down 3 names, people she's heard the older board members whisper about: internal audit, compliance, quiet cracks in David's perfect image. She's cleaned around them for years. They talk when they think she's deaf, invisible. Not anymore. A plan blooms behind her steady eyes, shaky, wild, but possible. If David wants to bury her family, he'll have to bury the truth too. She tucks the list back into her notebook, snaps it shut. When she looks out the window, the city lights blur with the faintest promise of dawn. Behind her, Kareem sighs in his sleep, dreaming of a safety that doesn't exist yet. Amina watches the sky turn pale and promises herself she'll build it, even if it means tearing David's walls down brick by brick. The next morning, Orion Exports hums with its usual hollow luxury, the soft chime of the elevators, the muted clicks of designer shoes on polished floors, the hush of whispered gossip that spreads like a shadow nobody wants to claim. Amina walks the same halls she's cleaned for years, pushing her father's squeaky cart past rows of closed doors, hiding sharp secrets behind frosted glass. But this time she's not invisible. People glance at her, too quickly, then away, as if afraid her defiance might be contagious. She finds Yusuf in the copy room, buried behind stacks of files he's rechecking line by line. The hum of the old printer fills the cramped space, warm and stale. He jumps when she knocks gently on the doorframe. Amina, he breathes, glasses slipping down his nose as he straightens. You shouldn't be here. She closes the door, behind her anyway, sliding the lock with a soft click. The sound makes Yusuf flinch. He looks like he hasn't slept, dark crescents under his eyes, collar wrinkled, hope clinging to him by a single thread. I need your help, Amina says. She keeps her voice low, like a secret too heavy for the walls to hear. Why? Yusuf glances at the door, then back at her. Amina, please. After last time he wants me gone too. I'm trying to prove I did my job right. That I didn't. You didn't fail. She cuts in. She drops her voice even lower, urgency tightening every word. He did, and he's hiding more than bad contracts. Yusuf rubs the bridge of his nose. You don't know that. Yes, I do. She steps closer, pulling a folded scrap of paper from her pocket, her careful list of names. She spreads it on the copy machine's glass. Under the hum of the printer, her whisper feels sharp enough to cut. These people, they know where the rot is. They talk when they think no one's listening. And I've always been listening. Yusuf scans the names: compliance officers, an internal auditor, an old HR clerk who survived 3 CEOs by keeping her mouth shut and her files close. His eyes widen. How do you even... I cleaned their offices, Amina says simply. They think the girl with the mop can't read. Yusuf lets out a breath that shakes at the edges. Even if you're right, Amina, if you push him, he'll destroy you. He'll destroy your father. He's already trying. Amina feels the truth of it settle in her chest like a stone in water. Heavy, cold, unyielding. But she doesn't look away. He's already destroying us, she says. If we stay quiet, we lose everything anyway. But if we speak, Yusuf shakes his head. If we speak, we could lose more. She leans in, her voice fierce but soft. Then, help me make it so we're not alone. A silence stretches between them, broken only by the printer's endless hum and the rhythmic slap of fresh copies landing in the output tray. Yusuf stares at the list, his lips parting like he's about to protest again, but no protest comes. Just fear, just the truth. You could ruin him, he whispers. Amina folds the paper, slipping it back into her pocket. No, we could ruin him, but I need you. Yusuf's eyes flick to the door again. Outside, footsteps echo past, voices murmuring about budget cuts and deadlines. The real talk happens behind closed doors, but Amina knows where those doors are now. After a moment, Yusuf's shoulders slump in surrender. All right, he says. Tell me what you need. Down the hall, behind another door, David sits in his office alone, except for his assistant perched at the edge of the desk. Laptop open like a dagger pointed at the company's throat. David's eyes flick over photos on the screen. Grainy security stills of Amina in the copy room, of Kareem pushing his cart, of Yusuf, looking too tired to stand straight. Watch them, David says, his tone clipped. all silk stripped away to steel. Especially her. I want to know who she talks to, what she touches, who she calls. The assistant nods, tapping keys so fast the clatter sounds like falling glass. If she slips, I'll know. David leans back in his chair. He taps a pen against the armrest, the steady click 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 echoing under the quiet hum of the city far below. His face is calm, but his eyes flicker with something darker, a spark of cruelty honed by fear. She wants a war, he says under his breath. He almost smiles, a cold, thin thing that never reaches his eyes. Then we'll give her one. Back, in the copy room, Amina slips her list back into her pocket as Yusuf hands her a folder. Inside are copies of the old contracts, tiny cracks that could break open everything, if they push in the right places. She closes the folder with trembling hands but steady eyes. For the first time since she stood up in that boardroom, she feels something like power bloom under her ribs. She's not just the janitor's daughter anymore. She's the storm knocking at the CEO's door. By Friday, Orion Exports hums with an undercurrent of static, a buzz that crackles just beneath polite greetings and forced smiles. Some employees feel it and step carefully around the edges. Others lean in, curious but afraid to say too much out loud. Amina knows the spark started in the shadows. She holds it in her pocket every time she wheels her father's squeaky cart. Down the executive floor, a spark shaped like a manila folder tucked under bottles of disinfectant and old rags. The folder Yusuf gave her holds pieces of rot, old expense reports with numbers that don't add up, contract drafts with last-minute edits scribbled in David's spidery scroll, hidden fees buried in legal language, meant to trip partners blind. She doesn't speak when she wheels the cart into the small office at the far end of the hallway. She doesn't need to. Mrs. Ruxana, the company's oldest compliance auditor, sits behind her cluttered desk like an aging lioness, half glasses perched on her nose, files stacked around her like a fortress built over decades. When Amina enters, Mrs. Ruxana doesn't even look up. "Leave the bin there," she says in her clipped accent, the same line she's repeated every night for 10 years. Amina sets the waste bin down, flips open the hidden compartment in her cart, and slides the folder out. She places it carefully on the edge of the desk, not too obvious, but not buried either. Mrs. Ruxana's pen pauses mid-scratch, her eyes flick to the folder, then up at Amina, a silent question that hums in the space between them. Amina meets her gaze just long enough to answer without words. "Please." The older woman nods once, barely a tilt of her head, before she goes back to her paperwork, like nothing happened. Outside the door, Amina exhales a breath she didn't know she was holding. The cart squeaks softly as she pushes it down the hall, heart pounding so loud she's afraid someone will hear it echo off the polished glass walls. Yusuf waits for her by the service elevator, hands stuffed deep in his jacket pockets like he's trying to hide the tremble in his fingers. When he sees her, he lets out a shaky laugh. "Did she take it?" he asks, voice hushed. Amina nods. She didn't say no. That's something. He rubs the back of his neck, glancing around. It started then. Amina wants to believe it, but the knot in her stomach tightens when she thinks of David's cold stare, the way he flicked invisible dirt from his sleeve like her family was nothing more than lint. It started, she repeats softly, but David is not blind. That same night, while the office hums under the glow of desk lamps and overtime sighs, he stands by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, staring down at the city lights like a king watching his subjects scatter. His assistant hovers nearby, screen open with security logs and whispered rumors fed by frightened eyes and careless tongues. They're sniffing around old numbers. The assistant murmurs. Ruxana's name came up twice, and Yusuf hasn't been at his usual desk all week. David turns, the city's neon glow reflected in his glassy eyes, and the girl, quiet. The assistant hesitates. Too quiet. David smiles thinly. He crosses the room to his massive oak desk, opens a drawer, and pulls out a single manila file. Kareem's personnel file, thick with 12 years of spotless record and half-forgotten praise. He tosses it on the desk. Then we remind her where she comes from. Amina doesn't hear about it until she finds her father standing in the stairwell the next morning, shoulders slumped, a pink slip trembling in his hand. She freezes halfway up the steps, the echoes of her sneakers loud in the cold concrete silence. "Baba," she whispers. Kareem doesn't turn. He just stares at the paper, The tidy corporate language that says redundant when they mean punished, that says cost-cutting when they mean silence your daughter. They said, budget cuts. Kareem murmurs, voice small in the stairwells. Hollowbelly said, they don't need me anymore. Amina's throat tightens. For a moment, the plan feels foolish, a child's dream built on borrowed courage. She wants to crumple the paper in his hands, throw it down the stairwell, scream until someone listens. But her father turns then, and the look in his eyes is not broken. It's tired. Yes. Hurt. Yes. But not broken. They think I'll beg, he says softly. He lifts a hand to brush a stray curl from her face like he did when she was small. They don't know you. Amina feels her heart settle into something sharp and steady. She nods, blinking back the sting in her eyes. They're going to know me, Baba, she says. Her voice doesn't tremble this time. Behind her, the hum of Orion's steel belly rolls on, unaware that the spark it tried to snuff out has just found fresh air. Monday dawns grey and restless over Orion exports. The sky presses low over the tower's glass skin. The city below wrapped in drizzle that streaks the windows like tear tracks dot inside. The air hums with a tension that tastes like static before a storm. In the break room, two senior managers stand, shoulder to shoulder at the coffee machine, their voices low but sharp. Did you hear Ruxana flagged 3 contracts? Same numbers, same suspicious amendments. Halberg signed off on every one. The other manager glances at the door, then lowers his voice further. It's the janitor's kid, isn't it? That girl, she started this. Shut up, the first hisses, but the spark has already jumped. Upstairs, behind the mirrored doors of the top floor, David feels it too. He sits at the head of a long mahogany table, board members flanking him like nervous courtiers, circling an unpredictable king. His hands rest flat on the glossy surface, perfectly manicured fingers tapping once, twice, before going still. Across from him, the head of compliance clears his throat, trying not to flinch under David's stare. It's an internal audit, sir. Standard procedure now that Ruxana raised discrepancies. I'm sure it's nothing. It's never nothing. David cuts in, voice soft as silk over steel. Nothing doesn't leak to the lunchroom. Gossip. Nothing doesn't get my own translator skulking around with files he shouldn't have. He shifts in his chair, the leather creaking like an old confession. And the girl. The compliance officer hesitates. He glances down at his folder as if the right word might be printed in neat black ink. The staff says she's the janitor's daughter. No formal title. But she's everywhere. David finishes for him, each word bitten off, like a thread snapped between his teeth. He stands abruptly. The table shivers under his palm. He doesn't raise his voice, he never does, but when he speaks, the room leans in, fearful and hungry. Find who's feeding her, who's protecting her, who else wants to test my patience. His eyes flick to the far end of the table, where a junior executive flinches under the sudden weight of that cold gaze. Outside the boardroom's thick door, Amina stands hidden behind a supply cabinet, Yusuf beside her. They hear only muffled shapes of words, but the anger leaking through the crack in David's voice says enough. Did we do the right thing? Yusuf whispers, adjusting his glasses with trembling fingers. If he traces this back to you, he already knows, Amina says. Her voice is steady, too calm for her 16 years. The only difference now is he knows I'm not alone. She holds up a battered company badge, Ruxana's spare guest pass, now tucked into her apron pocket like a secret key. He can't silence everyone. That night, the whispers slip past locked doors and flickering screens. Someone, no one knows who, leaves a copy of the flagged contracts on the copier outside HR. Another leaves an envelope on a cafeteria table at lunch, tucked under a napkin so neatly that someone finds it before the cleaners sweep it away. Doesn't watch. She keeps pushing her father's old cart down the same hallways she's polished for years. But now, when people see her, they don't look away. They glance, then glance again, like they're seeing more than a mop and bucket for the first time. David sees it too. Late that night, alone in his office, he circles his desk like a caged animal. His reflection in the dark glass stares back the perfect suit, the careful tie, the flawless mask that's cracking at the edges. He slams a folder onto the desk, Kareem's file again, now marked terminated in bold letters. The word bleeds through the paper like a wound he can't cauterize. He picks up his phone, thumb hovering over a contact labeled simply PR crisis. He could bury this. He's buried worse. But the girl, that quiet girl, she's lit something. In people that a press release can't smother. He thinks of Yusuf, spineless little translator with just enough spine to be dangerous when cornered. He thinks of Ruxana, old and stubborn, and too clever by half. And he thinks of the janitor's daughter, the spark in her eyes when she spoke Arabic so flawlessly the delegates laughed in his face. David places the phone down, staring at the blinking cursor on his laptop screen. Words swim in front of him. Investigation, leak, redundancy packages. He knows them all by heart. He knows he's bleeding power in drips. Too small for the board to taste yet, but enough to drown him if he doesn't cauterize the wound. Soon down on the street, Kareem waits in the drizzle outside the towers. Staff door, his shoulders are hunched against the wind. But when Amina steps out, he straightens just a little. She slips her hand into his small, cold, but warm where their fingers meet. "Did you hear?" she asks softly. He nods, his voice rough with rain and something like hope. They're talking about the truth. Amina looks up at the tower, glass and steel and secrets stacked 20 stories high. She feels the fear curl in her belly, sharp as a blade, but beside it sits something fiercer, steadier. "They're going to know everything, Baba," she says. And for the first time, her father doesn't tell her to be quiet. The morning the tower cracks open begins like any other. Glass gleaming in the dawn, marble floors polished to a shine that hides every footprint and secret. But under the hum of printers and boardroom chatter, the truth grows roots no one can tear out. In the copy room, Yusuf slips one last envelope into a courier bag. His hands shake so badly he nearly drops it. Ruxana stands beside him, sharp, behind her half-moon glasses, watching the door like a sentry. "You're sure about this?" Yusuf asks. His voice is dry from too many sleepless nights. Ruxana gives him a look that could wither concrete. Truth only bites when it's caged too long. "Let it out." He nods. He thinks of Amina, her voice steady when his faltered, her eyes bright when his blurred with fear. He seals the envelope and hands it to the courier with a single name. Board, chairperson, private, upstairs. Amina waits by the conference room door. Her father stands beside her, a faded cap in his hands, his uniform pressed, as if for the first day of work, not the last. They don't speak. They don't need to. Inside, the board murmurs like restless bees. David stands at the head, all cold charm and clipped promises. On the table in front of him sits a neat stack of fresh contracts, new partners, new translations, a desperate move to bury old filth under fresh paper. He leans forward, palms pressed to the glossy surface. These allegations are baseless. Noise from people too small to understand how this company runs. We need unity now, not rumors that embarrass us in front of our investors. A hand goes up at the far end of the table. The chairperson's, a woman whose silence has weighed heavier than David's words for years. She lifts the envelope Yusuf sent. Its seal is broken now, its contents spread across her mind like fresh ink on white linen. She places it on the table, slow and deliberate, the way a judge might lay down a verdict. "David," she says, her voice low but sharp enough to hush the entire room, "when were you planning to tell the board about the hidden amendments to the Dubai contracts? Or the misappropriated expenses?" David's smile flickers. "That's an old draft." "No," Ruxana cuts in. She stands now calm and immovable. "Those amendments were buried under language only your sign-off could approve. The numbers match the leaks." A quiet gasp ripples down the table. David's gaze darts from face to face. The loyal lieutenants who now shrank from his eyes. The cowards who never wanted their hands dirty. He tries to speak, but the chairperson lifts her hand again. "Your translator provided the final confirmations," she says, "and the janitor's daughter. She closed the deal you nearly lost and showed us where your secrets live." For a moment, no one breathes. Then someone murmurs, "The janitor's daughter." The words spread like a fuse catching flame. Outside the glass walls, Amina watches through the gap in the frosted pane. She sees David's mask crumble, piece by piece, a crack in perfect teeth, a tremor in a hand that always stayed still. David storms from the table, throws open the door. For a heartbeat, his eyes lock with Amina's, a storm behind glass. He tries to speak, to spit out some threat that might still hold her in place. But before he can, Kareem steps forward, not between them, but beside his daughter's shoulders, squared as if he's carried this weight all his life and only now remembers how to set it down. David's lips twist into something like a snarl. "You think you've won. You think any of this changes where you belong? Amina lifts her chin. For once, she doesn't need Yusuf's translations or her father's broom or a boardroom's polite applause. She has her voice. I don't belong to you, she says. Not anymore. Behind her, board members begin to file out, voices rising, in hushed, decisive anger. David watches them scatter, power bleeding from him in silent drips. His assistant appears at his shoulder. Pale and useless. Kareem rests a hand on Amina's back. No words, just quiet pride in the press of his palm. By evening, news spreads like an unstoppable tide. Orion's CEO resigns amid audit scandal. Whistleblower credits Translator and Janitor's daughter. The headlines flash on phones, whispered in hallways. Pinned up in break rooms, Amina once scrubbed until her hands cracked. In the quiet of their small apartment that night, Amina sits with Kareem at the kitchen table. He pours her tea the way he always has, careful not to spill a drop. You didn't just fight him, he says softly. You showed them, all of us. Amina looks at him, the man who taught her how to clean the world without leaving her dignity behind. She wraps her hands around the chipped mug, steam rising between them. I didn't do it alone, she says. She means Yusuf, she means Ruxana, but mostly, she means him. Outside, the city hums, restless, waiting for its next secret to crack open. But here, at their battered kitchen table, the storm has passed, and in its place, the janitor's daughter sits taller than any tower ever could.